Fun fact of the day, 409, do you know how it was created? It took 409 different experiments to finally come up with that cleaner of Formula 409. Did you know that? You know the story of WD-40? It took 40 different times experimenting with different things. They finally came up with this concoction that now they call WD-40 and sold worldwide. Or how about sticky notes? Did you know that there was a guy who's trying to create this very strong adhesive, but he was horrible at it. He wasn't doing a good job. Every adhesive he created, it just had this little stick to it, but not that much. Well, then came out with sticky notes. You don't want that much stick to it. You just want a little bit, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. Well, the same with Tetris. I just barely finished the movie Tetris, and I was blown away with the craziness that goes on. They're going from Japan to to Seattle to London to Moscow, and this is during the USSR in the late 80s. It is just the craziest story of how Tetris, the company, I'm talking about Tetris, the Tetris that you and I both know, that is the worldwide company, the best-selling video game of all time. That's the story that the movie tackles, and I think they did an excellent job. Here are my 3 takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is sell the vision even to the KGB, right? If you're not aware of the KGB, it was essentially the secret police of the Soviet Union, right? Well, this guy, his name is Henk Rogers, and he's the guy who's trying to get the rights of this video game. It was a guy in the Soviet Union who actually created Tetris, but he couldn't do anything with it, obviously, because he was in the Soviet Union. There was no private ownership in the Soviet Union, so he couldn't do anything with it. So the government owned it, and so Henk Rogers, this guy from Japan, is trying to negotiate the deals, and he's so amazing at sales. He sells the vision every single step of the way. There are 3 examples that I just thought of while watching the movie. 1, he goes to the CEO of what's the company? Nintendo, and he's sitting down with the owner, and he's like, "Hey, I would like to do this deal with this game Tetris." And he's like, "Well, how about we'll buy the rights from you for," I think it was like $250,000. I think it was actually $500,000. Right? It was $500,000, which in today's money is probably like $5 million. It's like 10 times as much. And he's like, it's a very generous offer, and I want to be your partner in on this. And the guy's like, wait. No, I don't do partnerships. We take the rights on these. And he says, I know that you usually take the rights, but there are always exceptions. And just like how Mario has Luigi and Donkey Kong has Little Kong, and names off a couple different examples that relate to the guy sells in the vision, you and I can be partners, and we can take this to the moon, and this is how big it's going to get. And the CEO of Nintendo looks at his translator, he's like, kind of gives him the nod, and he's like, you just sold me on the vision, let's go ahead, let's be partners. Another time is where Henk is sitting down with the inventor of Tetris, and the guy's like, no, I don't want to be a part of this. You're getting way too much into this government stuff. They're going to start coming after me if I'm involved in this. And he's like, hey, listen, imagine one day you and I are partners and we can make this, and kind of shares that same vision. And he's like, you're crazy. I'm not going to see a nickel of this. But the vision sticks in his head, and he ends up helping him out throughout the movie. Because he sold in the vision. And lastly, he sits down with essentially like the CEO of ELORG is basically, I don't know how to say it. It's like some Russian word. ELORG. It's this government, entity, let's call it, because it's not a company, because I don't have any companies, but is essentially a government company that has the rights of Tetris. And Henk Roger sits down with this CEO, and the CEO is just hard-nosed. He's not breaking, and he sells him the vision as well. And this guy ends up liking him. He ends up joining. He's just always selling the vision. Imagine Tetris is going to be this big. We're going to sell this many copies. We'll give you less up front. It's worse than this other guy, but I'm going to give you royalties. And, well, how many copies do you think you're going to sell? Safely, I think we're going to sell 1 million, but really, I think we're going to sell 5 million copies. And the guy's like, 5 million copies on 25 cents? He's like, yep, you're going to make over $1 million yourself on this deal. He's like, oh, wow, I can see the vision, right? Lesson number 2 is know your audience as if your life depended on it. Now, there are times in life, maybe not in an average business person's life, your life is actually going to be at stake, but it might be your house, it might be your mortgage, it might be your livelihood, right? It might not be somebody putting a gun to your head like in The Godfather or in this movie, right? You might not be negotiating with the KGB, but it might be your livelihood that's at stake. It might be your money that's at stake. And the thing is that Henk goes in to negotiate with these guys as if they're capitalists, but they're not. They're communists, and they have a different way of thinking. They have a different way of having customs. And he goes in and he just walks in the front door of the government building, which is actually illegal in the USSR at the time. You're only allowed to go into a government building as a foreigner with a proper, with an invitation, a formal invitation from the government saying you can come in to our building, right? He didn't have anything. He just walks in the front doors and he says, yeah, I would like to talk to the owner of this. That's fine. If you're in Japan, that's fine. If you're in the US, but if you're in another country that's illegal, man, you're not going with their customs, right? You have to know who you're dealing with in their audience, and he didn't play by their rules, and it really off-put a lot of people. And so that's the lesson. You have to know your audience. Takeaway number 3 is choose your city, state, country wisely. Because if you don't, you can, 1, not have a business, 2, lose your entire business. The story here is this guy invents the game Tetris in the year 1984, and it isn't introduced to the world until 1989, 1990, 6-7 years later, right? This guy was living under communism, and get this, he didn't see a nickel of the profits of his game for a decade. And you know how many copies it went on to sell? Not 100 million. It talks about, I want to get 5 million. Didn't sell 5 million. Didn't sell 50 million. It sold 520 million copies. Okay? Number 1 best-selling video game of all time. Number 2 is Minecraft at 300 million. They almost doubled. Number 2, the second in place, right? Tetris, biggest game. And he didn't make a single penny of profits until a decade after he made it, just because of where he was living. Now, the same applies to you. And it's not just with whether you can have a business or not. It's also how protected you are in your country, in your city, in your state. Now, it's going to be very different if you're living under in China or in Russia or in let's say Uganda, right? If you're living in one of these countries where it isn't very business friendly, you're going to have a lot of pushback from the governments, right? That's just the way that it is. Versus going into a business-friendly, and I say city and state because it's just as important. If you go to California and New York, versus Texas and Florida, there's a big difference on how you're treated from a tax standpoint and a legal standpoint. And I include the city because the city is important as well. If you get sued, you're most likely going to be sued on a city level, on a municipality level, and you're going to go to your city government. And if they are anti-business, then you're going to get screwed over, right? And same with taxes. So choose your city, your state, and your country wisely so that it is business friendly. Now, my challenge is go ahead, watch this movie. It is honestly life-changing. I'm going to say it. It's life-changing, right? It gives you a whole new perspective. One of those things like, wow, have I been kind of thinking inside a little box of my opportunities? This guy's flying all over the world making deals happen. It's a really cool movie. Once you watch it, I would recommend watching it edited. I like watching my movies edited so I don't get any other garbage. I'm going to include the edited version below as well. And lastly, go ahead, after you watch this movie, continue to watch one inspirational movie every single week. And when you do, I'm not talking about watching Peter the Puff-Nosed Dragon or whatever it's called. I'm talking about inspirational movies, which I have my movie list below as well. Check it out on my website. And when you do, you'll continue to be inspired to become a better person and a better entrepreneur every single week. Until next time, guys.